Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the 97 UX Things podcast. Dan Berlin here, your host and book editor. I'm joined this week by Daniel Diener, who wrote the chapter Don't Estimate the Power of Coworkers as Usability Participants. Welcome, Daniel.
Hi, Dan. How are you?
All right. Thanks for joining the podcast.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about our chapters.
Yeah, no problem. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, of course. My name is Daniel. I'm living in Germany. I'm now working since 9 years at Porsche, so the car manufacturer in different positions. And because our chapter is now 2 years ago, I was remembering that when I was writing the chapter, I was building up the UX design operations team at Porsche for digital products. And now I joined a different positions. Now I'm for 9 months a product manager for our rental and subscription platform at Porsche.
Mm-hmm.
So we are now giving people the opportunity to experience the thrill of driving a Porsche. So our product vision.
Very nice. Sounds fun.
Oh yeah, is it?
So you mentioned that transition from research to product management within Porsche, but can you tell us your entire UX journey there? How did you discover UX and wind up where you are today, please?
Yeah, I kind of stumbled into the topic. At the beginning of my career, I was studying sport management, and then I worked in the online marketing field for a soccer club in Germany. And one of my first projects was the development of the new website for the soccer club. And yeah, I don't know how and why, but somehow I was motivated to create a kind of prototype to just explain the agencies, explain to other people how I was imagining how the website should look like. And it was the first time that I was using a wireframing tool. It was
Yep.
Balsamic back in the time. I'm not sure if it's still available, but it was a nice tool also to show, yeah, like I said, other people, other stakeholders, what was my idea. So this was basically the first time that I somehow get into UX, but I didn't call it later than user experience. And yeah, after the really, really emotional time at Dortmund, or at the soccer club, I went to Porsche, and there I have different positions. But at the end, I was part of the marketing communication department, and we were responsible for corporate design, the corporate identity. So basically, we approved all the screens that agencies or people were doing. So we were a kind of approval. But to be honest, I was more into it. What was the thought behind the screen? So how did these people get there? And this was more my interest, or I was interesting. And this was also the idea or also the starting point where I get into design and also UX. So basically, I'm not sure, but maybe I was one of the first UX designers in the digital field at Porsche in an e-commerce store.
Mm-hmm.
And this was really nice experience. So also doing some things for one product, but at the end I saw, okay, it's really nice to do it also for more and more product. This is why also the idea became to build up UX knowledge, build up UX methods also for other products at Porsche. And this was also our starting point to develop a UX design operations team. And this I did for 5 years, and it was an amazing journey. And in that time, I also was writing the chapter about that we are talking today.
Great. Yeah, thanks for all of that. Do you remember what inspired you to make those wireframes for the football club?
Yeah, sometimes I was thinking that it's hard to express ideas when you're just talking about it. And for me, it was easier to display it and to show it when I was
Mm.
doing the wireframes. And when I did it, I was also thinking about, okay, is it really working the way that I'm thinking? And so I also was first testing some of the first ideas that I had, also thinking about how to structure the content, how to structure some of the kind of elements. And yeah, I didn't call it UX, but it was becoming somehow
Yep.
the first steps in my UX career. And I saw that it's when you're showing something, It's easier for people to understand, it's easier for people to discuss, and it's also easier for people to give feedback. What's maybe not working, what's working. And it was also nice because I was sitting close to our developers back in the time. So the discussions were on another level. So they were more and more detailed than when I was just expressing what I was thinking with words.
Very nice. Okay, makes sense. So yeah, you mentioned your chapter. You were building up the UX team while you were writing the chapter. Don't underestimate the power of coworkers as usability participants. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, at Porsche, it's really nice because I have lots of nice colleagues. So for me, it was obvious that when I'm doing a product, when I'm doing some kind of prototypes, I'm just asking some of my colleagues to get fast feedback because, yeah, asking or also recruit customers to talk about wireframes, to talk about ideas, it's sometimes a bit difficult. And then it was also my first experiences when we are creating the first digital products, when you're releasing every day or every sprint. So you need to be really, really fast. And I went also in the situation that I said, okay, I don't have enough time to test it. Okay, just build it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't feeling right from my point of view. And therefore I was thinking about different possibilities. How can I do it? Because recruiting customers, getting valuable feedback from them, it's a lot of work to do. You need to be really, really good prepared. And then I saw, okay, when I'm just talking with colleagues, I really also get valuable feedback because they have also a good opinion. They also have some domain knowledge out of their work. And it was valuable because they were thinking about things that I didn't saw when I was creating my kind of product. And yeah, this was the reason why I was thinking, okay, this is a really, really good source for me. And it's also fitting perfectly to this way how we are creating digital products with this fast and iterative ways, working in 2 week sprints. And in one of my previous projects, then we started to also work in 2 week sprints, but we recruited colleagues for each sprint to test these kind of ideas. So it's getting more in a continuous way, in a continuous flow. So we also always had it was the second Friday, it was a testing day. So I could be prepared. So I was really, really sure at the beginning of my work or at the beginning of my sprint, okay, this is the day when I want to test. We as a team could be prepared for that. And it was also easier for me to prepare also or recruit some participants, some colleagues, and also from different departments like accounting, like purchase, sales, customer service. And with every test, you saw, hey, it was really amazing what kind of feedback they gave to me. It was a good source of knowledge. And also for the colleagues, it was really nice because they saw, hey, it's really nice what you're developing. I can give you some kind of feedback. You're building up this feedback. So maybe the customer won't ask in the customer service for this. So this was the beginning of the way that I was thinking, okay, I need to ask my colleagues, or it's easier, faster for me to ask colleagues before I was testing with customers. And I don't say that, please don't test with customers. It's really, really important. It's valuable. And from my point of view, also one of the most important things. But I'm also saying, okay, if your colleagues are not able to use your product or don't understand your product, then the customer won't do it the same. So yeah, this was the intention also to write this chapter because it was for me a huge way towards getting faster, getting valuable feedback, and also at the end creating better products for our customers.
Yeah, you make a great point about how, okay, sprints are good in terms of iterating and advancing the design, but the research operations associated with bringing in participants every 2 weeks and the expense associated with that, you can alleviate that with your coworkers as participants. My question for you there is about bias And is using coworkers biasing your research, and is there a way to get around that?
Yeah. So of course they are having a bias. That's you cannot. It's not really easy to get rid of it. But from my point of view, when you're testing for at least testing usability, there are some points that they, of course, can help you. So I wouldn't use coworkers when you're trying to research some things like user needs, some behaviors, some behaviors of your customers. There are coworkers cannot help you because the bias is really really big.
Yeah.
But all the things when you're testing or when you want to conduct some testings about usability, they are really really good and can see almost the same things that customers can also see. And therefore, when you're talking with your colleagues, then just keep in mind, do testings and usability testings with that, but never use it for user needs evaluations or some other research methods. Don't do it.
No, that's a great point. Stick to coworkers for usability, but avoid them for generative. How about finding the right coworkers to have as participants? Do you have any tips in terms of finding folks to bring in?
Yeah, that's really important step. So when I was starting, I built up a database and also a huge network. So I was connecting with other people's at the beginning that I know. And after testing, I was also telling them, hey, please, if you know somebody else who would like to or give some feedback, please just let me know. So the first tip that I can give, start to build up your database, start to build up your knowledge network, and then it's getting easier for you also to recruit people, because you also don't want to bother them and recruit all the time the same colleagues, the same people.
Right.
And it's work, it's a hard work also to build up the network, but it's counting and it's valuable, and it will help you to be really fast and efficient. So you can also use kind of tools that you're using in your company. So for example, if you have a Microsoft Teams account, you can start to build up a group where you're posting some invitations for testings, you're building up your community, you're sharing the link that they can just join the community and see some kind of new testing. So there are multiple ways and multiple tools that you can use, but it's work. You need to do it. They won't come to you.
Right. I always say to folks that recruiting is the worst part of our job as researchers.
Yeah, but it can also be make fun, because networking, getting to know new people could be also fun. So
Great point.
start to enjoy your recruiting.
You mentioned tools. Or what tool are you using to track participants? Are you using just a spreadsheet, or are there other tools you're using?
Yeah, so on the one hand, you need to take into account also data privacy when you're talking with your colleagues, because at Porsche you need to really take care of it,
Sure.
because it's really important for us as a company. So mostly spreadsheets are helping you to know, okay, how often did I contact somebody? But at the beginning, when I was starting, it's more about a feeling. So you know who was participating.
Right.
You also conducted the testing, so you're aware of if the people are willing to do another testing, or if it was just a way that they said, okay, I want to do it for you, Daniel, because I know you, but not for anybody else. So for
Right.
example, but tools can support you, and if you're allowed to use some of the database tools, they can make it really really efficient for you to build up your network, build up your database.
Yeah.
And to be honest, this was also one of my advices, maybe later on, but there are so many tools online that you can use. So also after COVID, the people are used to do video calls. So beforehand it was not familiar for you.
Right.
And today, if you're just going into the internet, you can find lots of tools and lots of software that can support you in the entire UX research process or in the UX design process.
Mm-hmm.
And you just need to use it.
What do you have some examples there? What software in particular?
For example, when you're doing analysis, you can use Dovetail. Dovetail as a research repository. Also, that, for example, uploading your videos and analyzing with a transcription software, and also supporting you with tagging and analyzing the software. And from my point of view, one of the most important thing, also sharing your insights and sharing your knowledge. So therefore, for example, Dovetail could really help you, or UXPin when you want to build up some prototypes, really fast prototypes, to have also high fidelity things that your colleagues can test. So this can also support you. And there are many, many more that we are also trying to use, and we also invented at Porsche within my previous role at the UX design operations team.
Yeah. Cool. So Daniel, what else from your chapter were you hoping to convey here today?
Yeah, there are, from my point of view, 2 points that I would like to mention here. So on the one hand, it's ritualize your research. So when I was starting with testing my products, it was more or less not ritualized. So it was always stressful because you just wanted to get as fast as you can some kind of feedback.
Yeah.
But when I started to realize, okay, when I just do it on a Friday, then it's not as stressful as it was before, because you can prepare. It's also easier for your colleagues that they can get out and schedule their day, so they are aware that you can, or they are aware that on Fridays there are some testings, so your database is already aware of that. So ritualizing the research is helpful, and was really, really helpful for me to have this organized way. And the second point, it was building up a community event, because I was doing all the things, I was doing the research, but from my point of view, or I also wanted to have the possibility, or give other teams the possibility to get this knowledge, and also to have the possibility to test with coworkers. So we started at Porsche an event that's called Usability Testing Marketplace. So it was taking place once a quarter. It was the first 2 times was a live event, so teams had their own stands where people could test their products. So we had some laptops where you can test the digital products, but also somebody bring some Lego stones where he did card sorting, for example, or they printed out some kinds of websites and did, say, some A/B testings or preference tests and other things. So it was really amazing how creative the my colleagues went.
Yep.
And we had 5 teams that participated at this event, and then we are do some advertisement, or just get on the floors and said, hey, come, you can test your products, go from stand to stand, and see what these people are doing. And from my point of view, this event on the one hand helped other teams also to get aware that testing is helpful, that also testing with colleagues is helpful. And it was also a nice event for colleagues, because they can just, instead of doing a coffee break, they could go there and conduct some testing, learn some new products, and also get to know some other colleagues from Porsche. And this was nice. During COVID, we did it in a remote way. It also worked, but the atmosphere was not there.
Right.
So I'm hoping that now we will also do it on face-to-face meetings, because it was amazing.
Yeah, that sounds wonderfully fun. What a great way to get buy-in from your coworkers, to show them what you're working on and to show them your process. That sounds wonderful.
I think there's also online article about that, so there you can also see some pictures. When you Google my name, then you can find it.
Yep.
Because it was amazing. I really liked the event and I enjoyed it.
And what was it called again?
It was a usability testing marketplace. When you're searching it with Porsche, you need to find it, or you will find it.
Great. One question I want to come back to is the matter of incentives. Comes up a lot when we're dealing with participants on the outside. Obviously, we have to incentivize them for their time. Do you ever have to do that with coworkers, or should you?
You could, or you should also give them some kind of incentive. So, for example, some lanyards or other things that you could. But at the beginning, I wasn't thinking about that. It was
Yep.
totally okay for them to spend the time together with us, because one of the incentive for them was also to learn and get to know some kind of products for Porsche, and it was already in value for them, and
Right.
this was amazing. This was the reason why in the first testing sessions I was never thinking about incentivation. But as when we did the usability testing marketplace, we of course had some pretzels, some local food, and also some drinks. So this was incentive enough, and the people enjoyed it.
Food always brings the people. That makes sense.
Yeah, you're totally right. That was helpful.
So, Daniel, you gave us a lot of great information here today. I really appreciate you talking about your chapter. In our final section, we'd like to get a career tip. So is there a career tip you'd like to convey to people either breaking into the field or who have been doing this for a while?
So my career tip is build up your toolbox and tool knowledge. So when I was starting, I was always using some software and some tools that you can find on the internet. And I was always looking for tools and for software that can help me to do the entire workflow from creating digital products. So from recruiting people, there are lots of software outside that can help you also with cheap money, because you can do it really easy and really fast and cost efficient if you want to do. Then for prototyping, for creating some screens, till analyzing, there are so many things outside there that you can use, and then you are prepared for everything. Because from my point of view, spend the most time of your work thinking about problems, thinking about to solve problems, and use tools that makes you really, really efficient to work or spend your time on work that will solve customer problems or user problems, and not waste too much time in inefficient work. So as we told at the beginning of our session, recruiting could be really, really harsh. But if you have the right tools, if you have the right software, it can be really fast and also efficient.
Yeah.
And this is the most important thing.
Well, thank you for all of that. You gave us a lot of great information here today. My guest today has been Daniel Diener, who wrote the chapter Don't Underestimate the Power of Coworkers as Usability Participants. Thanks for joining us here today, Daniel.
Thanks, Dan.
And thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this. You've been listening to the 97 UX Things podcast, a companion to the book 97 Things Every UX Practitioner Should Know, published by O'Reilly and available at your local bookshop. All book royalties go to UX nonprofits, as will any funds raised by this podcast. The theme music is Moisturize the Situation by Consider the Source. And I'm your host and book editor, Dan Berlin. Please remember to find the needs in your community and fill them with your best work. Thanks for listening.